They had gone a mile or two when they passed one of the night shepherds upon the moorlands, and they cried to him to know if he had seen the hunt. And the man, as the story goes, was so crazed with fear that he could scarce speak, but at last he said he had indeed seen, with the hounds upon her track. Now, we could be talking about a lot of things here, but that is a scene from the beginning of The Hounds of the Baskervilles, one of the great Sherlock Holmes novels. Well, how does that tie in? It ties in because today we're talking about Beast. And yes, spoilers right at the beginning. This is not clickbait. This is truth. I believe this is one of the best Kickstarter games previews that I have done. If not, well, this is the best Kickstarter preview game that I have played. I haven't done as many as some of the other channels. I'm not as big as some of the other channels. But I have no problem saying that at this point. Now, does that intrigue you? Do you want to know more? Well, let's talk about why. Because that's really the important thing. What does it make you feel? How does it make you feel when you're playing it? What are its strengths? What are its weaknesses? What do you have to know whether or not this is a game for you? Because just like in that scene from Hounds of the Baskervilles, there's hunting going on. And just like Sherlock Holmes likes to always reiterate, the case is afoot. Let's do this. Now, the concept of a hidden movement style game is not new. It's been around for quite some time. Games like this have been around for easily a decade plus, just from the non-war game side of things. So using that element is not unique. But also on the Board Game Geek listing, there are only, including the war games, 200 games that use this. So this is also not a widely used mechanism that we see ad nauseum on a consistent, even daily, nay weekly or monthly basis. Things like Letters from Whitechapel, Scotland Yard, Spectre Ops all come to mind, where it's not just one versus one, where you have all of these games that are one side versus the other, but now we're one person versus multiple people. And so again, it's not something new. It's not something we haven't seen before, but we really haven't seen it with this theme. And originally, you may mistake this as your very generic fantasy theme. And to be fair, it is generic in a sense that it is, again, not something widely unique, where they're not creating a plethora of new monsters or races or types of enemies in that sense. So you may be going, well, Chris, why are we even talking about it? You've told me it's not new from this aspect, you're not new from this aspect, you're not new from this aspect. So where is the wide appeal? Because I would argue that this takes and stands on the shoulders of the ones before it, does it in the mechanistically unique way, and frankly speaking, it makes it a heck of a lot of fun. And I say that as a full disclaimer. I am not a hidden movement person. I have one other game in my collection that is hidden movement. So this mechanism is not, this is not the worker placement person telling other people about a great worker placement game. This is not a big Amerithrash telling you about another big Amerithrash game. So it's not someone who is already so passionate about this type of game that they just cannot wait to expout all of the virtues of this game to you. This is someone who arguably is not really a big fan of the genre in the first place, of the mechanism of that type, who is going to expout the virtues of this game to you. Because I think it's that good. I will dare say this is probably going to be one of my favorite games. Now, I have a prototype copy, and so I don't have all of the bling, I don't have all of the mechanisms, I don't have all of the maps. This is going to be one of my best games of the year, even in this version. It is by far and away better than, or I enjoyed it more, I should say, more than, and I enjoyed some of these other games, The Witcher, Deliverance, Football Manager, and I like those games. Those games were good, solid games. But this is and has been the most entertaining, the most I want to play this again game for me. It is going to be probably a top 10 game of the year for me without a doubt at this point. It's just a matter of how high it is. Now, again, caveat, full disclaimer about my background, I enjoy one versus many. So, although I am not a hidden movement, I enjoy one versus many side of things. So, take that for what you will. Now that we've gotten the preamble, now that we've gotten the context of my space out of the way, my bias, if you will, let's talk about the game itself. I've preambled long enough. What do you need to know about Beast to know whether or not this game is for you? Now, what did I like about this game? This game did not evocate the fear that Hound of the Baskervilles creates. However, at the same time, it creates the tension. And that is why Hounds of Baskerville is a classic. The tension of what is going to happen. The mystery of what will transpire. The mystery that is lost upon us nowadays with the vast majority of TV's movie, other sides of entertainment, which is why you can also look at sports as such a popular and growing interest over the years. Because in sports, anything can happen to a, you know what I'm saying, to a relative extent. But, was anyone going, oh, I wonder if the Avengers are going to win against Thanos? I wonder if the good guys on NCIS are going to win against the bad guys this week. There's no mystery there. We all know the end before the beginning. And so the tension that this game can create with the well-balanced, oiled mechanisms that it's able to utilize that, again, are not unique, but that are put to the very fine-tuned, oiled test even before coming to this point, is impressive. The sum of the parts in this game, is what I'm trying to say, is greater than the individual parts. And it shows. Something specifically I liked. The Beast side of things. Again, preferencing, I always prefer to be the one. That being said, sometimes with one versus many, sometimes the big critique, the big turnoff is, and they say this in this game and as well as others, if you are the one that is more experienced with the game, you want to be the one. But now let me be very clear. You do not need to have that much degree greater of understanding or learning to, one, make it balanced, but to, two, be able to operate it. It is not as high of initial learning curve to even get into it as some of one versus many other games are, where there is so much more nuance that you have to know and that you have to do and you have to be aggressive, and it's not there. Which means, and this is the most important part in how this relates, is then it's going to get to the table easier. Isn't that all of what we want then? If it allows you to get it to the table easier, that's the whole point in the first place, because so many of these games, one of my other favorite games, Rise of Moloch, great game, highly underrated, probably one of my favorite CMON games, but the learning curve is, for either side, with all the nuance and all the differences. Okay, in this dungeon crawl, you can, move this way, you can move non-orthogonal, or you can only move orthogonal, or you can target through things, or how is the line of sight in this? And no. You don't have to worry about that much minutia in this game, no matter what side you're on. And both sides share aspects of how you're using and how your turns are simultaneously going back and forth between. And it's smooth from that side of things, which again, when you play something that's smooth, it's going to make you want to play it more. The creatures themselves, another thing, are unique. I always worry about when you have this multitude of whatever number, 2, 4, 37 CMON different characters, How different are they? Are they reskins? Are they slight tweaks? Are they numbers for the sake of numbers? And I will tell you, they're not. You have a beast that is unique in how it plays, how the cards it has access to are going to change things. But then, going back to that lower overhead, there is also a selection pool from which you will get used to and start to be able to utilize in different ways that you are drawing from on a game by game similarity. And so it's again, how do you maximize that? But it's also not so different that playing one is going to be just a completely different learning curve than the other. Again, accessibility from a how much do I need to know rules scary, standpoint, if you will. The movement system is unique. And honestly, I was a little turned off at first, I won't lie. But the more I have done it, the more I have thought about it, the more it has grown on me. With the ability to choose my cards, to choose my direction, to try and outwit the hunters. Because sometimes you can, and sometimes it just doesn't matter what you do, you just can't. And therein lies the balance, too. It's not done in a irritating or frustrating way. It is done in a way to keep the game in question, going back to the beginning, to create that tension. Because there is nothing worse in a game like this, where if you have seen other games that have a game master or a one versus the all, where it is lopsided, where either the one has to hold back in order to not overwhelm, or the one has to play just out of their mind aggressive in order to make sure they just don't get thrown off the board in the first place. I did right away at the beginning. Because, learning this game, you don't really know what you're doing the first time you're playing. Let's be honest. And that's true, and that's not distinctly different in this game as opposed to others. That first game is a learning game. Oh. And then when it clicks, I should have done this. I could have done this. And those are the moments. Those are the moments that we look for in games to make them stand out. And for me, it created those feelings, those emotions, and those moments. Is the game perfect? No, I'm not saying that. I don't think a game has to be perfect in order for it to be amazing. Because there are lots of really well thought of games that provide the experience rather than the perfection. Isn't that what they say about Awakened Realms' Nemesis? The rules aren't perfect. There's some fiddliness, whatever that means. But it creates and has done a masterful experience in doing just that. An experience that people remember, that people want to tell others about in the first place, that you want to talk about afterwards, saying, if I would have done this, but I couldn't because, hey, remember that when you were over here and then we were over there and you didn't know that I had this, and then, but if I could have. That's what this game does. That same aspect of Nemesis, what makes Nemesis work despite its flaws, it has that charismatic it factor as well for me in this game. With the hidden movement, but the fragility of both sides at the same time, where there is more of a tango as opposed to a boxing match. It sort of goes without saying in this case that the art is absolutely fantastic. It is just tremendous. And that is just sort of the icing on the cake when it comes to this stuff. And so it just makes the thematic incorporation that much better. So what didn't I like, or what can I see also people not liking about this game? Well, for starters, going back to that last point that I made, if you look on these monster cards, for example, they don't have a lot of health, right? They have 4 or 5 health. These are not robust creatures where you're going to be taking tons and tons of damage and just slugging it out. So if you're looking for something more like that, where it is less strategic and more tactical, and don't get me wrong, you have plenty of both in this game, but if you were looking for something that is heads down, smack you in the face, this is not going to be your game. I mean, hidden movement might have been the first clue on that, but there is something more to be said of it as well. The other thing I will say is this game is definitely going to be better with more hunters. Now, I'm not saying it's bad with less hunters by any means, but I'm saying it's going to be a more fulfilling experience at the 3 or 4 player count. It just is. Because otherwise you do have one person controlling 2 hunters, and that's not bad, but it's also not ideal in my experience, in my general feeling of these things. Because part of that tension that is what we're so desiring in a game like this is the discussion on that side of things. As you are the beast, soaking in the discussion on the other side, listening to them plot and plan, and not only adjusting your reaction based on what they're saying, but also sort of going in your mind, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, oh, do that one instead, do that one instead, do that one instead. Whereas one person, there is no discussion, there is no creation of that external tension and dynamic through the conversation. And so having that with 2 or even 3 people on that side of the table, it adds just that much more. But if you're looking for a 2-player game count, I'm not going to tell you it's bad, but I'm going to tell you if 2 is your most common player count, you might not get as much enjoyment depending on you. Your mileage may vary, I guess, is what I'm trying to say at the lower player count. The other side of things, the rulebook needs some tuning up. Just some clarity, this is exactly what this means, this is exactly how this works. Just a fine-tooth comb this would definitely benefit from, because if you've had any games like this that you really want to enjoy but are put off by the small things in the rulebook that make it just that much harder to have a full understanding and comprehension of, I'm looking at you, Machina Arcana. That can be the difference between, wow! And, yeah, that was pretty good. And let's be honest, we want more wow games in our collection instead of, that's pretty good. We have plenty of, that's pretty good games in our collection. The other thing I'll say is, the variety here is fine. This is not the issue with the hunters and the beasts and all that side of things. A few more action cards. A few more action cards to give more variety there, especially on the beast side of things, especially on the hunter side of things. And there are a couple powers on the hunter side of things that when I was playing at the beast were very frustratingly frustrating. The ability for a hunter to go basically from one side of the map to the other because there was a city there, essentially, wherever it was, without any penalty, just instantly. So when I had one of my minions on the far side and they're way over on this side, I'm like, haha, and they're just like, oh, instant teleport all the way over here and kill you, and I'm like, come on, man. Again, why is that sort of bad? It takes away that tension. That dynamic of, well, you're going to have to choose which way you want to go. Well, he's just like, boink, boop. And I'm like, crap, man. And the other side of things is, this is a game where you really have to be very selective. As I mentioned, sort of tying into the point 1. I mean, when I was playing for the first time with Fenrir, for example, there's not a lot of opportunity to attack. There are not a ton of cards that just allow you to attack. So your attacks have to be very poignant and very well timed and very selectively used. And so I worry about things like that where just even a couple extra cards, a couple extra turns to be able to do that makes the difference between making it that much more taut versus making it kind of, I can't kill you because I just can't attack and do each one of your citizens that takes 2 or 3 damage, and you can move them away faster than I can do them the damage in the first place. So it's just little things like that need to be completely ironed out. And again, I'm saying that as someone who has not played this nearly as many times as the people who have made it in the first place. So maybe that's not an issue whatsoever, but that was one of the thoughts that I had. And it kind of goes along with that. It's sort of a weird mechanic. So you're killing these creatures, right? As the hound is sort of, stalking creatures in the outlands. And unless your main creature is the one that does the damage to kill said creature, you don't get the benefit. If your minion does the final blow, you just don't get anything. Which is frustrating, but also I understand it, because if you could have your minions spread out and just racking up these kills, because especially the cheap that are 1 damage, you can just be dragging in these points to be able to upgrade your beast and completely, again, make it lopsided. So the question in a game like this is, how do you want to keep it even? Do you want to make it so that resources are very tight and very close to the vest and have to be spent very wisely, and one mess up on that side of things could dramatically change or tilt the behavior or the balance? Or do you make resources so plentiful that it's more of the time of when you upgrade this versus this and how you do the order in them, not necessarily can you get them, that makes the difference? And they have gone with the former. And depending on how you feel about that, you might prefer one or the other. So you need to be aware of it from that side of things too. So, what do I think? Well, if you watched the beginning of this video, you already know what I think. This is my favorite pre-Kickstarter. This is my favorite game that I have gotten as a reviewer that is going to Kickstarter or on Kickstarter that I've done since the beginning of this channel. And again, like I said, I don't do as many of these as other people. I'm not as big. I don't have as many opportunities. But, I'm not putting a disclaimer on that. I'm not saying that as clickbait. I'm saying that because I believe it. And so when I say this game is going to be really good, I'm not going to toot my own horn too much about predicting good or not games. There are plenty of games that I like that other people don't like. But my picks last year, in case you're wondering, at the end of 2020, to see how I fared, some of my top picks for 2020 were The Loop, Nidavellir, and Cosmic Frog. So, if you share similar interests with me, those 3 have all been getting the hype over the last couple months. This is ringing true to me the same way that those all rung true to me as well at those times. So if we share interests, you might want to be checking this one out if you haven't already. Is it going to be for everybody? No, it's not. Is it killing it on Kickstarter despite all of that? Despite the nicheness of the one versus all and the hidden movement side of things? Absolutely. And so even if you're not a fan of those, I suggest that you check it out because, again, before this, I would have told you I really wasn't either. But that's why I like this hobby, is because all of a sudden something new comes along and takes it in a slightly different direction, and something you did not like before all of a sudden can be something that you now very much enjoy, even if it is just in that iteration. And that is what Beast does for me from Studio Midhall. There you go. Those are my thoughts. Those are my impressions. Let me know what you think. Any questions or comments, please, as always, ask away. And thank you for watching. If you're not, please consider subscribing. More of this where that comes from. So, as always, stay classy. Have a great day. Hopefully see you around.